I watched the final episode of The Sopranos live when it aired. I watched it with my family. It ends with a black screen. Let's explore what happened in this analysis video. What happened to Tony Soprano? It's a question fans have pondered since The Sopranos finale aired in 2007. The show ends with an abrupt cut to a black screen with no sound. Many thought there was a technical issue with their TVs. Then the credits rolled, and fans were left wondering what just happened. When asked about The Sopranos ending, David Chase said, "It's all there." And he's right. We can infer what happened to Tony Soprano by observing the pattern of camera angles. Let's analyze the final scene and find out. Tony enters Holston's and the doorbell chimes. He stands and surveys the room. It cuts to his point of view. We can see the table that Tony will eventually be sitting at. Then it cuts to a close-up of Tony looking, and then we see Tony sitting at the table facing the door. It's important to emphasize that Tony is facing the door. For a man whose friends have just been killed, and who survived an attempt on his own life, this is an ideal seat to have. He can easily observe who is coming into the restaurant. He looks for music on the jukebox, and then he looks up. Then there's a cut to his point of view, and he sees a woman enter. Let's remember this pattern. People enter, the doorbell chimes, Tony looks up, and then we see Tony's point of view. Following this pattern is perhaps the easiest way to infer what happened to Tony Soprano. Tony continues perusing the songs on the jukebox. We hear the bells chiming, and Tony looks up again. It cuts to Tony's point of view, and we see a man enter. Tony finally decides on a song to play, and he presses the corresponding letters and numbers and waits for the song to play. The bells chime again, and Tony looks up. His point of view this time shows his wife Carmela entering while Journey's Don't Stop Believing begins playing. Carmela walks over to Tony, and they say hey to each other, and Carmela takes a seat. They discuss the menu, and Tony asks where the kids are. Carmela tells him that they are on their way. There's a shot of a man in a cap preparing his cup of coffee, and the lively lead guitar solo plays in tandem with the suspense of the scene. This is worth mentioning because many viewers feel their senses heightened when watching this final scene. Carmela asks Tony if he spoke with his lawyer again. Tony tells her that one of his captains is going to testify. They don't seem too worried and are probably relieved they survived a war with the New York Mafia. The doorbell chimes again, and Tony looks up to see his son AJ walking in behind a man in a members-only jacket. AJ joins his parents, and he and Tony talk about the onion rings, and Tony pats his son's hand. It cuts to the man in the members-only jacket sitting on a bar stool. Seems rather unthreatening, just like the man in the hat sitting with his coffee. Perhaps this is to keep the viewer in suspense about what is going on, and wondering who to be wary of. It cuts to Meadow outside in her car. She's having a hard time parallel parking. Watching her frustration and listening to the lively musical score, combined with all the violence and death that transpired throughout the last few episodes, and all of the suspicious patrons in the restaurant, add to a feeling that something major is about to happen. Drinks are brought to the table, and the camera cuts to a young couple laughing, and then cuts to the man in the members-only jacket who seems to be eyeing the table with Tony and his family. Carmela and Tony encourage AJ to stay in his seemingly boring job because he's making contacts. AJ uses his father's words from season 1 and says to focus on the good times. Tony thinks he's being sarcastic, and then seems happy when he realizes the sincerity. The three of them smile, genuine smiles, a happy moment for the three of them. The scene cuts to Meadow outside still trying to parallel park, then to the man in the members-only jacket going to the washroom. Tony senses the man walking and looks up at him. Then there's another shot of Tony's point of view. He's looking over AJ's shoulder and sees the man in the members-only jacket walking. Tony doesn't seem too alarmed by the man. Let's note that the door with the men's sign on it is the women's washroom at the real Holston's where the scene was shot. The show's set designers replaced it with men's for this scene. This final episode was written by the show's creator, David Chase. So he must have written this in for a good reason. They each take an onion ring and then it cuts to Meadow hurrying across the street toward the restaurant. There's a shot of the family at the table, and then the doorbell chimes as Meadow enters. Tony looks up, repeating a pattern we've seen throughout this final scene. The next shot in the pattern should be Tony's point of view, which should be his daughter Meadow. But instead, we see a black screen. This symbolizes Tony's point of view. We can infer that Tony was shot to death. When we look at the last shot of the family together at the table, it suits the point of view of someone standing in front of the door to the men's room. Perhaps it's the man in the members-only jacket who went into the men's room to retrieve a gun, like what Michael Corleone did in Tony Soprano's favorite film, The Godfather. Or maybe the man just went into the restroom so he could exit and have an easy vantage point to shoot Tony from. The pattern of point of view is the easiest way to infer the fate of Tony Soprano, but there are some other clues throughout the series. In an earlier episode, Tony and his brother-in-law Bobby are on a lake talking about death and being whacked. Bobby says, "You probably don't even hear it when it happens, right?" We don't hear a gunshot at the end of the last episode, we just see a black screen, which makes sense because a bullet travels faster than the speed of sound. So if it killed Tony instantly, he wouldn't have heard the shot. And that line from Bobby is repeated when Tony is sitting on a mattress in a safe house, thinking back to their conversation. And when Silvio Dante is at the table, when Jerry Torchiano gets whacked, he notices the blood on himself, but everything is muffled, and we don't hear the gunshot until Silvio presumably recovers from the shock of the situation. Season 6 begins with an episode called Members Only. It gets its title from the jacket Eugene Pontecorvo was wearing. The fellas are talking about fashion outside Satriali's, and Vito says, "Members only? How long have you been wearing that?" Eugene wanted to retire and move to Florida, but Tony wouldn't let him. Unbeknownst to Tony, Eugene was also a rat. Feeling pressure from many sides, Eugene hangs himself. The man at Halston's was wearing a members-only jacket, much like Eugene's. Perhaps this symbolizes some sort of revenge from beyond the grave. And if all of this isn't enough to convince you, let's talk about an earlier season. In the episode Funhouse, Tony wakes up crying and depressed. He is lying next to Carmela in their bed. Everything's black, he says. Perhaps this is deliberate foreshadowing, because the last thing we see in the series is a black screen for about 5 seconds until the final credits roll. Tony Soprano is a much-loved anti-hero, so many of us would like to think something else happened, and I can certainly understand that, since it's my favorite series. And well, who knows? Maybe David Chase has a different interpretation and knows of a different fate for Tony. My name is Justin Tobin, and thank you for watching. For those of you who have been watching my channel, you probably know that No Country for Old Men is my favorite film, my favorite novel too. But I would like you to know that my favorite television series is The Sopranos. It's a masterpiece of entertainment. I can't think of a better show. So I have a bunch of No Country for Old Men videos on this channel, so you can probably expect some Sopranos commentary videos as well. Not just this one, but there will certainly be more coming, I'm sure. If there's a film or television series that you would like me to comment on or analyze, please comment the name of it in the comments or send me a message, send me an email, and I'll certainly consider doing that.